Hi, Liz. How are
Hey,
you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm, for a boy my age and weight, I have very few complaints.
Love that.
Endorsement practically every day. Hi, Laura. Hi, Lane.
Hi. Good to see everybody.
Like,
Nice to see you too, Elaine.
Lucy, do you want to pause the recording until we start the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, because you never can move around.
Oh, there's Anne. Hi, guys.
There's Lucy.
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Our camera isn't working. Anyway.
Totally fine.
Video was on.
I'm going to ask you guys to, oh, thanks. Thanks, Lucy. Okay. So hi, everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Laura Silber. Today is October 8th, and this is the Martha's Vineyard Commission facilitated joint affordable housing group meeting. So my colleague Lucy Morrison is running the Zoom, and our topics list for today is going to be a very quick check-in about the housing production plans. Then we are going to check in very briefly about the upcoming joint housing committee hearing in the legislature next week on transfer fee bill and another seasonal communities bill. And then we're going to dive into the seasonal communities draft regulation and the public comments that I circulated around. And then if hopefully we'll have some time at the end if there's other town topics folks want to discuss, we can talk about that then. I did want to remind everybody that on the 30th of the month, Chilmark is hosting a Lease to Locals conversation. They just placed their first family. I hope everyone saw the article in the paper.
Yeah.
Got more stuff in the pipeline. It's very exciting. So that invitation went out from the town of Chilmark. So if you're able to attend that meeting, please do. And there's some upcoming events that I had that are on the JAG calendar event that I send out in the email. I just want to go over them quickly so they're on everyone's radar. The annual Housing to Protect Cape Cod Summit is October 30th in person in Hyannis. Registration is required, and I provided the link. It starts very early. It's 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., so generally requires an overnight unless you want to get on the first boat. This is a great networking meeting. It's been really successful advancing policy conversations to actually get our region to organize to move things forward at state level. And it's a great way to network with other communities dealing with the same issues that we are. The CHAPA regional meetings, Cape and Islands meeting is a virtual meeting on November 6th at 10 a.m. I sent everybody information about that. If you can attend, please pre-register. CHAPA emailed me today to say, hey, did you send the announcement out? I know it's a month away. They like to know who's coming from where. I will send you out a reminder in a few weeks. You'll be well represented by Island Housing Trust, DCRHA, and myself, but it's always great to get some more town voices in the room for that. This is how CHAPA sets their regional priorities for the year, and they do an excellent job advancing policy agendas for our district and for other districts at state level. And then finally, on November 13th, the Martha's Vineyard Commission is going to be hosting a virtual ADU presentation with a Q&A from the Mass Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So that's EOHLC. Their division that is dealing with the ADUs by right has offered to do a presentation. They're doing this at all the regional planning agencies. So if you can make that virtual meeting on November 13th, it's going to start at 6:30. It'll be part of the regular Martha's Vineyard Commission meeting. And that's going to be a great place to get island-specific information from the state and ask questions. Okay. Alrighty. Let's launch right into the housing production plan updates and any questions. The final drafts of the housing production plans have gone out to all 6 island towns. I have not heard back from any town except Oak Bluffs as to whether or not this is on an agenda for adoption yet. Oak Bluffs is, this is a priority for them, and they had a very vigorous housing production plan they were already implementing. So my understanding is that that is on the agenda for the planning board to discuss tomorrow night. That's October 9th, and possibly take a vote. Are there any other towns that have scheduled discussions in the planning board or the select board for housing production plans that you're aware of? Is the first question. And secondly, does anyone have any questions about where your town is with the housing production plan draft? John, Rao.
I'm on the planning board and it's not on the planning board agenda. I don't know that it's on the select board agenda or not. I have the feeling not.
Okay. So that would be a conversation inside the town of West Tisbury as to how you guys want to advance this, because it's in the hands of the planning board and the select board now. So if you guys need assistance with that, you can just have somebody from the planning board reach out to me and let me know. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, it's same in the People's Republic of Chilmark. But we have a housing committee meeting on a week from today on the 15th, and I'll make sure it's on the agenda for the housing committee to push this along, and to get it on a planning board agenda as well. I will say the HBP for Chilmark, it was a bit of a chore to get it approved. We did get it because of the experience of having had one not too many years ago, but it has been very useful, and it is especially because it reminded all of us of the housing burdened population within Chilmark, which is just so important to keep that going. And also, I will say that with the excitement and the interest with the lease to locals, everything having to do with affordable housing is much more present than it has been. And I think as we follow how the lease to locals works out, we're going to get much more information of that. So we're trying to coordinate all of that and to keep the interest that has been sparked by the lease to locals, to keep that in front of people and to help move all these other things along. So I think we're in a good climate at the moment. We just have to keep our feet to the fire, or cliche of your choice.
That's great. Thanks for the update, Peter. I was in most of the Chilmark meetings and I thought you guys did a fantastic job actually moving a really good plan forward. So just a reminder that it doesn't move forward after this by itself. So the planning board and select board do need to have conversations and then take a vote in order to get this approved to file with the state. And then there's a bit of a lag time between filing and getting it approved. So for any town that has units that you want to show on your subsidized housing inventory within the next year, you really want to get moving on this so that you have an approved housing production plan before you have units come up to go on the SHI. Because if you have units come up and you don't have an SHI on file, there's a limited amount of time after which it can actually go on the SHI and count towards safe harbor. And this is all a safe harbor issue. So there's a timing thing that's really important. You want to get the housing production plan approved sooner rather than later so that any subsequent units you create that qualify for the subsidized housing inventory actually count towards your safe harbor. Right? They'll all go on the SHI if they're eligible, but they won't count towards safe harbor if you haven't gotten your plan filed in a timely way before those units come online. Yeah, Elaine, you have a question or something about Tisbury?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm not in a position to report on Tisbury, but if you could tell me where we're at, I can push some buttons if necessary.
I don't know where you are actually. All six housing production plans were delivered to the planning boards and select boards at the end of September. Our
I've read
deadline
it.
date was the 30th, so they all got it. And I have not heard from towns besides Oak Bluffs as to where they are and what the next step is. So this is just a check-in to say that, if you're in contact with your planning board and your select board, or you're on the planning board or select board, just a reminder to keep this moving forward in a timely fashion. And if anyone needs me to attend a meeting to help parse some things out, I'm more than happy to do that. I just need enough notice that I can get it on my schedule.
That's great. Well, I've read the copy because Victor had distributed it. I just didn't know where else it was at. So I'll check around and make sure we take some action on it.
Okay. It's only been a week, but I'm really trying to stay
know.
on top of this because I want to make sure that these things move forward. And Oak Bluffs is moving so quickly. Shanette, do you have any idea where Edgartown is on this?
Yes, so I the select board, I haven't seen, heard of anything in regards to the select board or the planning board having on their agenda. But I know for the Affordable Housing Committee, the meeting is on the 21st of this month, and the discussion, they will be discussing that. It's October the 21st at 5 p.m.
Okay,
Let me get the
October
schedule.
21. Okay.
Yeah, 5 p.m. So they're going to discuss that, and I guess they'll vote if they see it okay. They'll vote as a recommendation for the select board to move forward with it, and also copy the planning board. So that's what they're going to be discussing, whether or not, something they need to recommend or they feel like they can recommend to
Okay,
the select board.
that sounds great. And is that an in-person or virtual meeting or a
That one
combination?
is in person.
Okay. Super. Anybody from West Tisbury know where you guys are? Oh, we already did West Tisbury. Sorry, John.
You did.
Excuse me. We did West Tisbury. I don't see Aquina here. And we did Oak Bluffs, we did Edgartown, we did Shellmark, we did West Tisbury, and Tisbury we don't know, and Aquina's not here. Okay, that's everybody. Great. All right, any further questions about the HPPs, or shall we move to the next topic? Seeing no hands, we will move on to the next topic. So, and hi Ariel, I see that you just joined on. Nice to see you. Okay, so October 15th, in their infinite wisdom, the Joint Committee on Housing in the legislature has called a hearing on a number of housing bills for Wednesday, October 15th. That's next week. One of the bills that they have called is H 4410 S 966, which is called, this is a long title, an act relative to funding housing and mitigating investor real estate in seasonal communities, otherwise known as the Seasonal Communities Transfer Fee Bill. This is a super important bill for our district because this is an enabling bill that would allow approval of a local option transfer fee only for seasonal communities to opt into. So this is potentially a path of lower resistance for the transfer fee through the legislature. So it's hugely important that we come out in support of this bill. They're taking testimony through the hearing date and after the hearing date all the way till November 1st. So tomorrow I'm going to send out a testimony template and information on the hearing. The Housing Bank Coalition is doing a great job of organizing folks to sign up to testify live, both in Boston and remotely. And my task is just to get the information out and help supplement that through the towns and make sure that the town boards get in their written support as efficiently as possible. So we'll have a couple weeks to get that in, and I'll send all that information out tomorrow. Does anybody have any questions on that hearing? Okay. Yeah, John Rao.
Yeah, why did you say that this is the path of least resistance?
It's a path of lower resistance, not necessarily least, but lower.
How so?
There's consternation at state level as to how a transfer fee might play out if any of the 351 municipalities in the state had the option to opt into a transfer fee.
Mhm.
So what this bill proposes is that only communities that have been designated as seasonal communities would be eligible to opt into a local option transfer fee. So it
Okay,
makes
I
the
get it.
case for resort communities.
Mhm.
And historically, mostly where we see luxury real estate transfer fees being incredibly effective is actually in resort communities. So our housing bank legislation that was filed, Nantucket's, Chatham's, Provincetown's, Truro, Falmouth, that's all modeled on things that are happening in Aspen, Colorado, and Vail, and the Hamptons, and other areas that are resort communities. So there's a potential that, this, first of all, the state has already recognized that the needs of our region are significantly different through the seasonal communities designation. So there's a possibility that tying eligibility to the seasonal communities may be a little more palatable to the legislature. We
Mhm.
don't know, but we will find out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. There's a second bill that's being heard on the same day, which has a very long title, but we're calling the Seasonal Communities 2.0 bill. I'm going to send the information on that out with you. on that out with this as well. It's a dense bill. What it is Julian took all the tools that we didn't get in the seasonal communities designation that other towns have either asked for or been talking about and compiled them into like a seasonal communities 2.0. There's a lot of stuff in there, and we haven't had a briefing with Julian with the towns here to vet the pieces or really discuss it. So I'm a little hesitant to dig too much into that with everyone, but it's important to keep that bill moving forward and get it reported out of committee favorably so it can move on to the next committee. Because when I show you the seasonal communities designation, which I'm going to do next, and the guidance, there's 3 statutory changes that need to be made in order for the toolkit to work as effectively as it's supposed to. And that Seasonal Communities 2.0 bill will be the vehicle for those amendments to get introduced into the legislature. So the bill as it's proposed now, things change as things move through the legislature. The important thing is that the vehicle keeps moving so that we can attach these amendments onto it. So I'll include that information. I'll include information on it in the template, and it will probably be a 1 or 2 line referencing. And also please report this Seasonal Communities 2.0 bill out with a favorable. And if anyone has specific questions, they can call me, but you know, Julian's really asking us for help keeping that moving forward so we can use it as a vehicle to fix the things we need to fix in the seasonal communities draft regulations. Okay, if there are no further questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share and I'm going to show you the PowerPoint that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities showed the Seasonal Communities Advisory Council to break down the guidance, and I will show you the places where I have provided comments and Island Housing Trust has provided comments. Nantucket's going to provide comments, and Brewster on the things that were identified in the seasonal communities meeting as needing either a regulatory fix within the regulations or a separate statutory fix through legislation. Okay. So, and forgive me, this is dense material. So if anyone has questions, we'll stop periodically and you can ask questions as we go along. And I'm going to, a split screen is going to be really complicated. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to look at the PowerPoint and I'm going to talk through the recommendations in my public comments, which were provided to all your town administrators and also to everyone in the JAG and all the planning boards. Okay, Lucy, I'm going to attempt to screen share. There we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this was from the September 11th presentation on Nantucket. Here's the contents. Okay, draft regulation. All right, so the first section is the key definitions. What is an attainable housing unit? We now have a definition in state law. Single family residential district, year-round housing unit. What is a year-round housing occupancy restriction? This is important because this is the first time in state law that this is defined. It's a restriction limiting occupancy to individuals or households who have signed an agreement with the seasonal community to occupy a dwelling unit for 10 months, 10 plus months of a 12-month period. So the actual language reads, I believe, a minimum of 10 months of a 12-month period. So this is important because this complies with the way Island Housing Trust and DCRHA are doing their year-round occupancy restrictions, which are usually 11 months, and allows a little bit of leeway for public sector employee workforce housing or other year-round occupancy restrictions if necessary to a 10-month. And that would be up to the individual municipality how they want to do this. So first off, one of the comments has to do with the year-round housing unit and the year-round occupancy restriction. This is just a clarification. The guidance itself is actually very well written. What we're asking for is to add a definition into the year-round housing unit and the year-round housing occupancy restriction, referring to community land trusts as a vehicle for the year-round housing occupancy restriction, because the actual language refers to a deed restriction, which is generally a deed rider, that's held by the seasonal community. As you can see here, I'll just put my cursor around this. Individuals or households who have a signed agreement with the seasonal community. My cursor's not really working. So the request is to recognize that the agreement can be with a community land trust, which is acting as an agent of the community, and that would be equivalent to a year-round deed restriction. It's important to have this in the regulations so that the way the vineyard towns are actually utilizing Island Housing Trust as the entity who develops and then monitors and enforces year-round restrictions is a really important piece. I see that Elaine Miller is raising her hand, although I can't see her. So Elaine, you have a question?
You have to unmute, Elaine.
Okay, so this is specifically to IHT and the way they manage their properties and their ownership. Is that correct? There's not a land trust out there that I don't know about.
Well, actually, there is a land trust on Nantucket that's
Yeah, but not
starting.
on the vineyard,
I'm sorry?
but not on the vineyard.
We have, yeah, Island Housing Trust is our community land trust on
Okay.
Martha's Vineyard. Nantucket
Just-
now has a community land trust, and the Cape Cod Commission is investigating the establishment of a Cape-wide community land trust. So
Okay,
this is
I just-
important for our entire region, not just for Martha's Vineyard.
Okay,
we're-
I just
we're
wanted to
the-
see how it applied to Martha's Vineyard, and that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, we're the only one who's actively using the community land trust model for public projects, but the other towns of our district are going to be following suit.
Mhm.
Okay, Philippe, do you have anything to add to this? We have Philippe from IHT here, so I'm
I
just.
don't know. Thank you.
Okay. So a second part of this is recognizing community land trusts as in the regulations as legitimate enforcers of regulations that they can be an agent of a municipality to monitor and enforce restrictions through an agreement with the municipality. This is just this is literally just a language fix to make sure that what we're already doing here on Martha's Vineyard keeps working. Okay. This section is the designation itself. How does a town get designated? How is that accepted by the community? Can it be denied? And how is the eligibility revoked and under what circumstances? So this has already been accepted by the local legislative bodies here on Martha's Vineyard and in Gosnold, also in Nantucket and the Outer Cape towns. So the local legislative body, if it's a council or it's a town meeting, has to vote to accept or deny the designation. Municipalities can accept the designation after a vote to deny without a need for redesignation, which means if they deny the first time, they can vote again. And then notification of the secretary is required. So revocation, how municipalities may vote to revoke their acceptance, and this just outlines how they can do it. Are there any questions on this? I had no comments on this. I thought this was very well thought through. There was robust discussion about it. Doug?
Yeah, you just said the first one refers to the municipality revoking. The
Mhm.
second one is the state revoking it, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yep, you're right. I should go into that a little bit more. So there's only
And-
two, there's only two there's only two requirements that a seasonal community has to adopt in order to comply with EOHLC's requirements for the designation. And that's to adopt a tiny house bylaw. We're waiting on the model bylaw for that, and we'll get to that section next. That seemed to have been actually very popular with all the island municipalities. There already is a tiny house bylaw in Nantucket that was used as the model, or is going to be used as the model for the model bylaw. The second requirement is a bylaw provision that allows the unlocking of undersized lots for year-round housing. It doesn't have to be capitally affordable, it just has to be year-round. Some of our towns like Oak Bluffs have already done this recently. Last year, Oak Bluffs passed a bylaw that reduced the setbacks and the frontage for undersized lots to unlock them for year-round housing. And that unlocked approximately 50 lots within the built environment in the town of Oak Bluffs. So again, model bylaws will be provided, but these are fairly easy things to adopt. And the undersize is just undersized for that municipality. So in West Tisbury, it's a 3-acre zoning. Undersize would be anything under 3 acres. I have no concern that about the island towns being able to adopt bylaws that would be in compliance with this requirement. Are there any further questions on that?
I had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just trying to understand municipalities may vote to revoke their acceptance by a vote of their local legislative body. Does that mean just a select board, or what is that making reference to?
Local legislative body is town meeting.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
There's a
Yeah.
town meeting yet. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Was there a second question? I'm sorry, I can't see hands because
Doug also
Yeah.
had his hand up again.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, you're not concerned about zoning zoning changes being adopted, but it's an 18-month timeline. And zoning changes often take a while. Do you know if the towns are actively pursuing these?
Well, so it's within 18 months of the regulations effective date, which is a ways out.
Okay,
These are draft regulations. This is why I'm not super concerned. The 18 months doesn't start until these regulations are actually promulgated and effective.
got it.
So we're only in the draft phase now. We've got months to go before these actually get finished and go into effect. Any more questions on that? Okay, there's also a waiver process, which we'll get to. So if something happens and a community is really trying hard and they can't get it done within the 18 months, we'll get to the waiver process, and there's a process for applying for a waiver to extend that 18-month time period. Okay, further designation, meaning will there be any other specifics in the designation or other communities that would be eligible, and that'll come out in forthcoming guidelines. Okay, so here are the zoning requirements that I just referenced. So there's only, as I mentioned, there's only 2 requirements. The requirements are that municipalities adopt zoning that permits undersized lots to be used for attainable housing, year-round housing, and tiny house as of right in all single-family residential zoning districts. The text has to be submitted to EOHLC within 60 days of adoption, and a record of what's permitted under that zoning bylaw is required. So the undersized lots, it limits the as of right requirement to year-round attainable housing units. So again, there's not requiring any kind of an AMI restriction to be put on these units, just has to be year-round. Attainable as defined by the state, which I believe they're going to define as up to 240% AMI.
I've had that, yeah.
Okay, it does not include a square footage limit for the maximum size of undersized lots. It only specifies that lots must be smaller than the minimum lot size in the zoning district. So this is going to be different for each town. Okay, it prohibits residential units on undersized lots from being rented for less than 6 months. So it's going to be no short-term rentals, and it's a minimum of 6 months rental. Tiny houses. It limits the as of right requirement to year-round housing units. There's a potential that this may require some kind of interaction with the state building code. Where tiny houses fall now under the state building code, some of them fall under what's called alternative housing, which has a requirement for owner occupancy. So EOHLC will be working with the state to make sure that that doesn't conflict with this requirement. It requires tiny houses to comply with state building code and local enhancements, so an opt-in energy code or whatever any community has, applicable water and sewer requirements, and floor to area ratio requirements. The last piece, and this was important because town said, listen, what about tiny houses on wheels?
No.
Each municipality is allowed to further regulate or prohibit movable tiny houses, which means that if you don't want them on wheels, that's okay. If you do want them on wheels, that's fine too. So the hope is that this is going to be a really powerful tool for small units, particularly ADUs, because what it would do is do away with the minimum square footage requirement for a residential unit. Okay, here's the waivers. So this allows municipalities to request a waiver of requirements based on a lack of local or regional capacity, or if implementation would cause undue hardship. That's going to have to be proven, but there's a pathway for that. EOHLC will develop a waiver request form to be made available to municipalities. So that,
Shanette has a question. I think it was on the last slide.
oh, sure. Shanette, is that the last slide? Do you want me to go back?
I just have a question in regards to the attainable, because I thought it was at 250 percent
240.
AMI. And I heard you mention 240, so I was wondering if there was like discussion that made it go down. Because on the draft that they had, the original draft, it said 250.
It's still 250. Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, any question on the waiver? Okay, moving along. Okay, so here's the part that's going to require some statutory fixes, and this is really important for Martha's Vineyard, for Nantucket, for the entire district. So right now, we were sad to discover that under MGL 184, Section 31, a year-round occupancy restriction is not included in that statute. And despite Senator Sears' best efforts to work language in to the seasonal communities bill that would allow year-round housing occupancy restrictions to be in perpetuity, it will indeed need a statutory fix, because right now, under the regulations, it can only be a 30-year term. So EOHLC wants to see this perpetual. Our state legislative delegation wants to see this perpetual, and every town in our district wants these year-round occupancy restrictions to be perpetual. It's going to require a statutory fix, so Senator Sears' office is working on the language, and EOHLC is coordinating with our legislative delegation on the introduction of that language as an amendment to an existing bill, and we are going to try to push that forward so that a statutory change can be made by the end of the session to define year-round occupancy restrictions as in perpetuity. So that's prominent in my public comments. That is something that needs to be highlighted by all towns who are adding public comments to this. Again, everyone is aware of this. Everyone who's working on this is aware of this, and we know it's going to require a statutory fix. Are there any questions on that piece? I'm not seeing any hands from my end. Lucy, do you see any?
Nope.
Okay, so moving on to the trusts, and these are the year-round housing trusts. What this section does, if folks recall, is it allows for a formation of regional housing trusts via an intermunicipal intergovernmental agreement. So it means that multiple towns who are seasonal communities can create a year-round housing trust without having to file special legislation. For the island towns, what that means is the Martha's Vineyard towns could enter into an intergovernmental agreement to create a regional housing bank without needing to file special legislation. Okay, so it establishes 3-year terms for the members. It outlines who the members of the board need to be. And it grants the same powers as municipal affordable housing trust, which is what we all have, except, and again, this requires a statutory fix. Unfortunately, the regulations cannot exempt these year-round housing trusts from taxation and cannot exempt them from 30B, which is public procurement law for intra-municipal transfers. Municipal affordable housing trusts are exempt from both of these provisions. So what we need is explicit granting in statute that these provisions apply to year-round housing trusts. Again, EOHLC is aware of this. Senator Sears' office is aware of this. All the towns in our district want to see this happen, but it requires a statutory fix. So again, the senator and the legislative delegation will introduce language in the form of an amendment to an existing bill to ask for a statutory change that would allow this. Okay, so everyone's all on top of this. Again, this is prominent in my comments, and any municipal entity that's going to file comments, I would ask them to emphasize this as well. Are there any questions on this?
Doug
Me
Ruskin
again.
has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
I don't have any questions on the bullets in the slide. I sent you an email and I got a partial answer back from you. The way I read the composition of the trust, it requires, the language to me seems unclear. It requires a select board member to be a trustee, but in a regional trust, the way I read it, you could end up with a trust. You could end up with 5 or 6 trustees, all of whom are select board members. There's no mention of the need for housing expertise or housing experience. And I'm wondering if that might warrant some review.
Okay, thanks for raising that, Doug. Let me make a note here.
If you remember, when we put this forth from the Housing Bank Coalition, we had an independently elected set of board members. I certainly have no objection to a couple of select board members being on the regional board, but I personally have a problem with them all being select board members.
Okay, so that's a valid point, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I will add something to my comments and include a question around that. The clarification needs to be made.
Can I make a suggestion to offer?
Yes, please.
That trustees be selected from membership in other appropriate boards, like the Board of Assessors, the Planning Board, the Housing Committee, things like that. Maybe even the Community Preservation Committee. I'm not sure that's critical, but and certainly 1 or 2 at large. On a regional, certainly, I don't know if there should be a distinction between a trust that is the way this
I think
reads, you could have a year-round housing trust and the municipal housing trust in one town, right?
You could, and you could have the exact same board members on both trusts.
Yeah, well, okay.
There's
So
an,
I think a more of a distinction needs to be made for a regional body.
I think you're right. Okay, thanks for pointing that out. That's why we're having this
Thank you.
conversation. Okay. All right, so that's specifically around the regional trust. Okay, any more?
Peter also has his hand up.
Peter, yes, go ahead.
Just to follow up on what Doug was suggesting,
Mhm.
it seems to me that there's going to be room in this discussion for things that will end up being recommendations in addition to suggestions for regulation. And so I think I would hope so, that there would be some, that some of these things will come up in that form. There will be a list of recommendations as these things get worked out, I would expect.
Recommendations for implementation?
Yeah,
So that'll come afterwards,
yeah.
not in the actual guidance
Not in the
document
actual,
itself.
not in the actual language, right?
Right, there will be subsequent implementation documents, like model bylaws that'll come out for the 2 bylaw requirements, and further, support documents, and but that won't be included within the actual regulatory guidance itself.
Right. I was just thinking, but in terms of what pool from what pool might the trustees come is one of those things that might be worked out. I mean,
Yeah, so I think, so the way that this works for municipal affordable housing trust is that Mass Housing Partnership has a really robust program that educates municipalities and defines best practices for municipal affordable housing trusts. And they do tutorials and workshops with towns. They have a very robust document that's used as a guideline in the state. And the hope is that they will be able to do the same thing for the year-round housing trusts.
great.
That may take a little bit longer to put together. Right now, we're focused on making sure that the guidance is accurate because there is a timeline on when EOHLC has to get the actual regulatory guidance out.
Right.
Okay, but that point's well taken, and I absolutely agree. Any more on the trusts? Okay. All right, this is the public sector the employment and vocation specific housing. So this is around for the Vineyard, the interest is in the essential public sector employee preference. So overall, the criteria in the project still have to meet requirements for funding sources used to develop the project, meaning if it's CPA funds, it still has to comply with the CPA funds AMI eligibility. If there are other funds that have restrictions on them, like state workforce housing funds, it has to comply with that, the AMI restrictions on those funds. It also has to comply with affirmative fair housing marketing plans, which for those who've been participating in the HPP process, those are marketing plans that offer out the units in a way that complies with Massachusetts fair housing law. So the comments on this, well, I'll get to so the second bullet point is must abide by fair housing law, and the community must notify EOHLC of any related fair housing complaints that may arise. That's pretty standard. So the comment on this that we submitted, that IHT submitted and I submitted, is that right now it defers approval of this to the agencies that are approving the affirmative fair housing marketing plans, or the entities that are approving that, or the divisions within EOHLC who are approving that. That's a different division than the division that's creating the regulations. So the comment here is that we submitted is the current draft regulations defer to the requirements of subsidy programs and 40B subsidy programs regarding a unit's eligibility for the subsidized housing inventory. However, this approach may inadvertently exclude projects with ongoing municipal and public sector employee preference from SHI eligibility if the relevant subsidy program does not explicitly accommodate such preferences. Okay? So what we're talking about there is not just can you do this, but if the units are 80% and below and otherwise comply with affirmative fair housing marketing plans, can they show up on your subsidized housing inventory? Does that make sense? That's something that wasn't specifically covered in the regulations. It said that they were eligible as long as they met the AMI eligibility in the affirmative fair housing marketing plans, but it didn't provide a pathway towards ensuring that they would meet the affirmative fair housing marketing plans. So that's something that we asked for because that's hugely important for the entire region to make sure that these units for ongoing public sector employee preference actually count on the subsidized housing inventory. Are there any questions on that? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So the next section is around the essential public employee preference itself. So the first requirement, and this is pretty minimal, is that a seasonal community must support development through direct financial assistance, property tax relief, or donation of municipal land for the preference to be applied. We all wind up with CPA funds from our towns in public projects. And it's very common when a developer is going for state funding that there needs to be a local match on the town level in order to show interest from the locality. So this doesn't require anything that's not already being done. Are there any questions on that bullet point? No? Okay. So then it defines what is an essential public employee and who qualifies for the preference. So the preference includes households with at least one municipal, county, or state employee, and this is important, as defined in line with the conflict of interest law in MGL 268A, essential for public health and safety in a seasonal community. This includes, but is not limited to, teachers at public institutions, public works employees, publicly employed first responders, town administrators, and other employees essential for municipal operations. This would also include sheriff's department because it does refer to state employees. It can include county employees as well. And then the last bullet point, it says, and this is important, beneficiaries may be employed full-time, part-time, intermittently, or on a volunteer basis. This is really critical because of the volunteer firefighters that we have in a lot of the Cape and Islands region and other volunteer positions that are essential to public health and safety. The town has this criteria around essential. So this doesn't mean that every single person who volunteers in any capacity in the town is eligible for a public sector employee preference. It's designed to allow volunteer firefighters, EMTs, and public safety personnel to qualify for these preferences. Are there any questions around this? I had no comments on this. I thought this was actually very well crafted, and we spent a long time. I was on the committee that worked on this, and EOHLC spent a really long time making sure that this was all in line with the conflict of interest law and, complied with state law. I see no hands, so I'm going to move on. Okay, this is a section that was not of interest to our island, but was in here because of requests from Provincetown and I think Wellfleet. Artist housing, I haven't heard any desire from any of the island towns to create artist housing, but they have the right to do this, as does anyone else who's a seasonal community. It allows municipalities to further define who qualifies as a person who, quote, by vocation produces or supports artistic and literary activities. The units must be designed for occupancy by artists and used in pursuit of the occupant's artistic or literary vocation, and the units must be affordable or attainable. Again, nobody's required to implement this, but this is an option. Are there any questions on these bullet points? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on.
Oh, sorry, we had one.
Okay. I can't see who you are, so just go ahead and ask the question.
I've never done, I apologize, I've never done a little fake hand. Regarding central.
That's okay. Can you identify yourself? Because I can't see you. I have the screen share up.
Oh, sorry, Wanda Blake Higgins, West Disbury,
Wanda,
Affordable Housing. Hopefully you can hear me because these earbuds are weird.
I can.
Central public employee preference, the volunteer employees, is there a regular amount of time that they're required to volunteer?
You're cutting in and out, Wanda. So if you can try to get closer to your microphone,
Sorry.
that would be helpful.
Does the volunteer municipals, firefighters, EMTs, is there a number of hours they're required to qualify for this, to be employed, or not employed, but to volunteer to qualify?
There's nothing in the regulations that requires a minimum number of hours. They're leaving it up to the judgment of the municipality. They have to be essential for the implementation of public safety of the municipality. So that's going to be a policy that'll be decided on the local level.
Okay, local level. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, residential tax exemption. Come here, cat. Okay, sorry. All right, municipalities which have already adopted the residential property tax exemption, which not all of our towns have, but several have, may increase the exemption, which is now maxed out at 35%, to 50% or less of the average assessed value of all Class 1 residential parcels within that municipality. Okay, none of our towns are at 35% now, but there are other towns in the district that are at 35%. So this gives all municipalities the right to go to 50% if they choose. And then gives outlines for implementation, which are no different than the current implementation for adopting a residential property tax exemption. So are there any questions on this? I had no comment on this because this just increases the existing number to a higher number, and it's a local option. I heard someone, but I can't tell if that was a question or not. Okay, hearing no questions, I'm going to move on. And the last section is on the comprehensive housing needs assessment. This is not a requirement, but it suggests that communities who are seasonal communities do a comprehensive housing needs assessment every 2 years, which is a really good suggestion, frankly, and the MPC is planning on updating our housing needs assessment every 2 years. Are there any questions on that? And it's not to be confused with housing production plans. That's every 5 years. The comprehensive housing needs assessment sets the stage and gives us all the data that we need to actually understand what's going on. So we last did one in 2024, so the plan would be for MVC to update that in 2026. Are there any questions on this? Again, this is not a requirement. This is just a suggestion, and what it does is confirm that public funds can be used to fund these assessments, which means we can apply for grants from the state, and housing trust funds can also be used for the assessments. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Then we had a funding discussion. Where is the money coming from? So the good news is that the governor put aside $2 million for seed money for communities that have adopted the seasonal communities designation in this first round. So when I take the screen down, I will explain what that looks like. And then next steps. Okay, here's the process of the regulatory next steps. Drafts are made available for public comment, which is they're out now. There's a 1-month public comment period that closes on October 31st. That's right here. Step 3, the regulations will be finalized with the Secretary of the Commonwealth. Okay, so the Advisory Council next steps. There will be another Advisory Council meeting on the 13th. Again, that's an open public meeting. There's always a Zoom option if anybody wants to attend. December 31st, there will be an annual report due. And then I believe at the end of the year, are we on the last page? Or they don't have this here. Okay, my understanding is that at the end of the year, once the regulations are finalized with the Secretary of the Commonwealth, that they will go into effect, I believe, on January 1st. So that is the timeline. And now that I can look at everybody and tell you that we're going to be getting money from the Commonwealth to get these this process started, it's not going to be a lot, but it's going to be $50,000 to $100,000 per municipality, which is not nothing. And we'll have a list of what those funds can be used for. They likely will not be able to be used to fund projects per se, but to be used to set up the infrastructure necessary for implementing the seasonal communities toolkit, which would be expanding the capacity of the municipality or the housing authority or a monitoring entity, et cetera. Or, you know, we'll get a laundry list of this from EOHLC. That's not out yet, but as soon as they have that, they'll be providing that to us and I'll circulate that. Okay. Thanks everybody for hanging with that. Are there any more questions? Yes, Doug.
You've been compiling the recommended amendments to this. Is there a desire for requests and recommendations from elsewhere? Or are you having everything funnel through you?
Oh, no. It would be great. I've sent this out to the town administrators and said, I would love to see the towns weigh in on this. Let me know if you need help putting your public comments together. And here's my public comments that you may use as a template. So any individual person who would like to provide comments, please do. Any entity that would like to provide comments, please do. And any town board or committee that would like to provide comments, please do. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. In the email that I sent out with all of this from EOHLC, there's a link to the submission information. You just click on it. It gives you the address to submit your public comments to, and you just submit your public comments in writing by October 31st. It's very simple. You get an acknowledgement almost immediately, and then it goes into their official public comment review. Wanda, did you have a question? I saw your hand go up and then come down.
No, I was just happy that I found it.
Okay. All right. Elaine has a question. Oh, Elaine, you're muted. Can you unmute, please?
There we go. Yeah, as I look through all this, it just seems to me that each town has to look at a compliance officer to follow all these regulations. Has that ever come up in any of your discussions?
There's
How-
no need to have it. You don't need a compliance officer. The regulations are for implementation. It's not for
execution within the town?
No, I mean, the execution on the town level is going to be part of town policies that are going to have to be drafted so that they're followed. But the intent is not to need a separate compliance officer. In the
Okay,
same way that the town has policies around, administrative leave, they have a policy around pets in the office, they have a
Yeah.
policy around using cars that belong to the municipality. They will have a policy around public sector employee workforce housing preferences.
I guess I'm just looking at the practicality of it, because now that we have ADUs that have to be monitored, and we have building departments, et cetera, that are really running very fast to keep up, and I'm just wondering if this is something that should be discussed, or is it just my own issue?
I think it's just your own issue because this is not something that would be under the purview of the building inspector. My hunch is that the towns are going to want another entity to develop and monitor these units. The towns generally don't develop their own projects. The most recent projects that we've seen, RFPs have been put out, Island Housing Trust has been selected as the developer. And then going forward, Island Housing Trust is responsible for the monitoring compliance of all the restrictions.
Okay.
I'm expecting that that's how the towns are going to choose to do this.
Mhm.
And if they don't, then at that point, they will need to engage somebody who does monitoring compliance. But there are plenty of entities who do monitoring compliance, including DCRHA, including IHT, including the community builders, including Housing Assistance Corporation, and including many other state-approved companies across the state of
Okay.
Massachusetts.
So there are the resources, okay,
Absolutely.
okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Any other questions? Nope.
Well,
Wow, we may actually land this plane. Oh, Peter, do you have a question?
just a comment.
Yeah.
I'm really, in all of this, I'm really glad to see the term attainable housing. And I'm a little embarrassed that the People's Republic of Chilmark didn't come up with this about 4 years ago. Because to have had that option on the table and understood by people as something worth considering would have been very useful for the conversation that we've been slogging along with for the last 3 or 4 years. So this is very useful to have that notion embedded in this, in all of this discussion.
Great. And Peter, rest assured, Chilmark's not the only town that hasn't been employing attainable housing. That's the reason why it's now getting defined in state law. Senator Sear actually coined the word through one of his legislative filings a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And the idea was to embed this in state law so there's an actual concept that can be, duplicated within the towns. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't necessarily need to think about units that were deed restricted up to 250% AMI. Now we do.
Yeah,
So,
very important.
yeah, exactly. We may land this plane very shortly. It's 6:01. Are there any other questions on the guidance or the regulations? Okay, if your town or your board or committee needs help drafting your public comments, please reach out. Please don't wait until 5 o'clock on the 30th to reach out to me. The deadline is Halloween, and who knows, maybe I will be out trick-or-treating, so please give me a few days' notice. If you want me to attend a board or committee meeting, I need to hear from you as soon as possible so I can get that on my schedule and make sure that I have time to attend. Okay? And I'm also happy to answer questions in writing or over the phone. Yes, Jeffrey.
Hey, Laura. Just a quick question. I saw in your comments that I think it was in your comments, you had defined capital A affordable based on this as up to 100% AMI?
No, capital A affordable is up to 80. CPA funds fund up to 100. There might have been a reference to there's no reference to AMIs in my comments.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I thought it was in the document that you sent.
No, there's no AMI
okay.
reference in the document that I sent.
All right, I'll go back and figure out what I was referring to because my question was about that being pegged at 80 or 100 versus 140 or 150 as
Well,
sort of the capital.
The state definitions don't change. So capital A affordable is always going to be up to 80%. Community is going to be 81 to 150, and then attainable is going to be above 150.
Got it. Thanks.
Sure thing. Okay. Okay. If there are no, Shanette, you have a question. Go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, Jeanette. Can you unmute?
I'm just gonna piggyback on what Jeffrey just said, because on the draft plan, it does say affordable housing unit is up to 100% AMI.
What page is that on, Jeanette? I'll take a look at that.
The very first page on the draft plan,
Okay.
it says it cannot exceed 100% AMI 980.
That sounds like a typo. So let me look at that
Okay,
draft plan.
draft plan page 1,
Okay.
because I was getting excited, but like, okay, they're doing it to match the CPC.
Yeah.
No, the
Yeah,
state's
and that was my, my
Is that what
question
it
was
is?
just, you know,
Okay.
just about things sort of matching because, you know, like in West Tisbury, for instance, we now allow certain, you know, certain things to go up to, I think 150, for instance.
Yeah, most of the towns do now, Jeffrey.
And just all of those things not being sort of having the same definition gets a little confusing.
Yeah, so I will check with you, HLC. Thank you guys for raising that. My understanding is that none of the state definitions are changing.
Got it.
Okay. All right, great. Anything else? Jeanette, since you're sitting in front of your computer and I've got the screen up, can you just shoot me a quick email saying check draft plan page 1, seasonal communities designation 100%? Thank you.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think that's it. If everyone's okay with me just calling it a day at 6:04 and letting everyone leave, I would love to do that. And then if there are other town topics that you guys want to discuss, send them to me in an email and we'll put them on the list for the next joint affordable housing group meeting. Okay. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a
Bye,
lot. Have a good
everyone.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lucy, for running the Zoom. Take care.